and it hit my foot. It was fractured. I couldn't drive out of there. They didn't have medical supplies nearby, and the fields were not protected with safety nets.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming back to another recording of Foul Ball Safety Now Talks. I'm Jordan Skop. I'm here with Brianna Ludwig. It's the beginning of June. We're already at June 10th. Baseball season well underway, and a lot's been happening. And for those who are joining for the first time, Foul Ball Safety Now started back in 2019 when I saw something very disturbing on the news, and it involved a child and the line drive had unfortunately made contact with her upper body, her head. And I thought it was pretty disgusting. And I thought that this could be prevented going forward. So I made a few calls. I spoke with an attorney who I know who recommended it by the guy named Brendan, who had some time in his schedule to create an advocacy campaign. And we've been going strong for about 7 seasons, 7 years. And our work has been very interesting. So when people see Foul Ball Safety Now for the first time, they'll see that we've been making noise, been going to court, rented out airplanes, and interviewed many people, including the unfortunate gentleman whose wife unfortunately got hit at the Dodger game. And she died a few days later, back in 2018. Erwin, his name was very generous with us. He's come to 7 of the virtual press conferences that we had. We had major media show up to these virtual press conferences. People Magazine, Forbes, Boston Globe, LA Times. Very nice that they mentioned the initiative and what we were doing. But Foul Ball Safety Now continues because I've been following just what's happening inside and outside on the professional level for around 6 years. And then last year, when contacted by a college athlete, I realized the problem is a lot greater on the academic, or at least on the collegiate level. There's 900 Major League Baseball players. There's between 5 and 8,000 professional players in the lower leagues, but there's 35 to 50,000 college baseball players. And this student athlete had contacted me and he said, "Hey, Jordan, we're worried." I'm like, "Well, what are you worried about?" He says, "Our balls are leaving the field and there's an elementary school next door. And we know eventually we're going to do some serious damage." And I'm like, "That is very legitimate." So I got on a letter writing campaign to the Queens College administration and connected with the athletic director, and usually get the obligatory, "Yes, we're looking into it, and the president's been notified of the university." We did get a newspaper reporter from the Queens College who had the courage to call the athletic director, and we got an article about the issue. And we now put the NCAA on notice. And just doing a simple Google Earth of 46 fields, D1, 2, and 3, they seem to all be connecting their fields to either neighboring fields or parking lots. And unfortunately, like in Modesto, California, one or many balls that hit the pavement or the potential window or the potential head every 3 to 4 hours during batting practice and games. It's not really good business practices. Maybe it never was. Well, really, it's never been a good business practices to let willy-nilly experiences happen and random experiences where, the only line of defense may be heads up. And at some of these professional places, what do you tell someone like Brianna, who's a mother of a 2-year-old, where to park the car? Because the strings attached to the conditions of parking in the ballpark, parking lot, and going inside the game in many of these smaller places. So I'm hoping, like not too long in the distant future, we will recognize that business unusual up until now has been straight up incorrect. And once influencers, other than myself and the people around me who are dedicating their part time, like Brianna and Brendan, to this, they're paid employees. I wish I had 3 more of them because then we would uncover more. But I'm glad they're putting their part time work to this campaign. So, yes, we need advocacy in every zip code, in every ballpark, in every zip code on all levels needs to be addressed. No more heads up, when one ball leaves the field and then the other person has a second to react whether the ball may hit them, or unsuspecting fans like maybe Brianna and her family bringing the little ones to ballparks and where they're part of a statistic because there's a million baseball fans. I mean, 100 million baseball fans out there, clearly. And I have something on the website called the Less Than 1% Injured Club. And unfortunately, every year there's new entries into the Less Than 1% Injured Club. There probably have not been a million people that have had life altering experiences, but there've been thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And that's from just data we discovered and data that we're collecting on our own. We hope these discussions will be discovered and people will decide for themselves their own experience as a fan, potentially as a position of influence. It could be an attorney, which we've had a few on. It could be an MD, which we've had a few of those guys on. We had a pediatric neurologist on. Very thoughtful questions. That was back in December. So thank you for being part of this continuum with us, Alicia.
I am super excited to bring on our guest host for the day. She is a motivational speaker, public speaking coach, and most importantly, she is a mother. Welcome, Alicia Pizzani.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jordan, for that wonderful, thorough explanation of not only your platform, but the scope of the problem and what inspired you to get involved in this initiative. I was drawn to your cause because as a mom of a baseball kid, I was unfortunately struck by a foul ball. It was before the games started, and my daughter and I were out at the edge of the parking lot. I thought we were far enough away, and I am fortunate that it hit me instead of my 3-year-old daughter. And it hit my foot. It was fractured. I couldn't drive out of there. They didn't have medical supplies nearby. And the fields were not protected with safety nets. And so my initial reaction to your cause is this is amazing. It's definitely needed. Now, I did some digging, I did some research, and Jordan, I want to ask about this scope of the problem a little bit more. You mentioned about how there's been a lot of awareness, but when I researched it, I got some higher numbers. You talked about professional baseball in college, right? But the youth baseball and softball is over 1.8, almost 2 million players. And when you include travel baseball leagues, that's up to 16.7 million.
Mm.
Now, I saw that the problem is because that all of these fields and leagues are operated independently by community-based organizations. There are national guidelines, but they're enforced locally. Now, you can imagine all the variations in that, right? Because there's all budgets that have to come into play, and anything where there's recreation, that's not going to take, top priority. So what do we think might be a good way to get some kind of national exposure?
Well, I mean, thank you. Very, very good. You see, just now I'm thinking all levels of baseball, and of course, the younger people, youth baseball from 5 or 6 years till teenage years. Obviously, so many more people play baseball and softball at that level than they do at college or in the professional leagues, of course. And it only came on my radar a little over a year ago when the Queens College student had reached out, and I realized I kind of knew that parks and high school facilities. A high school parent had called me a couple of years ago. A place called White House, Tennessee. Believe it or not, there is a city called White House, Tennessee. So they're now on the radar because he said, "Hey, we can't have soccer and baseball at the same time. Can you help us?" I said, "I'm glad you're speaking about it. I don't know what exactly you want from me. I can give you supporting data and enthusiasm, but clearly your own experience, Alicia, is referenced in your mind. And clearly that zip code or where that field is probably still the same, where it's willy-nilly and there's really no thoughtful plan on what to do and what the right approach may be. But what I am confident about, Alicia, is that once the community wraps their head around what is happening at that particular place of play, architects, engineers, and designers would love to get involved because it may cost money for nets and protocols. Who better than sophisticated professionals, architects, engineers, and designers who may even have kids playing in those youth leagues and would cut their rates drastically and would welcome the challenge of creating the ecosystem, which just never was. These young people are growing up with a cloud over their head because the previous generations haven't given the younger generations an opportunity yet to play the game free and clear. And I visualize that as realistic, not far fetched. And I'm hoping that happens on all levels of baseball.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I love that idea that the communities have to rally and bring in the right people. And, from my experience in the Little League, it's a volunteer organization, and there's a president who generally is a loud, outspoken person with volunteer helpers, family members maybe who get everyone involved to make this what it is. I mean, even in our Babe Ruth League, the parents were the ones to fix up the field, not just the field cleanup, but safety issues and taking care of the facilities from start to end. And so, that really, I think, I like that idea of educating the community and the players. I mean, there's so many kids that get injured by getting hit by balls or running into one another on the field. We had a couple kids that were, even hospitalized with concussions because of that thing where sometimes you don't see the ball coming. And when the
Sure.
ball's coming outside of the area of play, right? The spectators in the stands and in the sidelines, and these are areas where I think they really can do some simple fixes, as you mentioned, to get things done. So, in terms of this idea about getting that, you mentioned that you had press conferences and you had media
Yes.
attention in magazines. Is there anything that our listeners can do to support your efforts with getting this out?
It's really up to all of us to look in the baseball mirror and finally address it. But these young people, these young children who are growing into the sport as they grow older, baseball, softball, they're hitting it harder. But they're also getting further more into the indoctrination of the culture of silence. They may know what the risks really are, not a matter of if the next spectator will be smashed, but it's a matter of when. They and their parents are in the know, but most of the people are just not. People like Brianna, they're going to these facilities not knowing there's conditions and strings attached. Why can't we finally open up to people like Brianna and tell her this is exactly where you park, no conditions attached? This is exactly where you go into the game and experience 2.5 hours of joy with snacks, with undisturbing scenarios of potentially going to hospitals. What is that? These are
Mm.
predictable. I have an exhibit, Alicia, on the website, a published report from 2019, which demonstrates just how many foul balls there are every year. This is not just Major League Baseball. This is 5 times as many more games throughout California and the United States, 14,000 games a year. You can almost retrace your steps, Alicia. Now, you may have dodged a beeline line drive like most people have, but the less than one percenters, they did not. And there's
Mm.
hundreds of thousands of these experiences, these mini missiles that are coming at you. So if you retrace your steps, oh, we went to these ballparks 3 times a year over 10 years. That's 30 times. Do you recall a time where there was a close call? And I believe most of you will say yes. Did anyone leave? I'll believe most of you say no. You may see the popcorn go pop or the beer explode, but everyone has a nervous giggle. If you realize how often these near misses of human beings occurred, you'd be like, why would I walk down that high rise in New York between 5th and 6th Avenue if I knew there were 40 potential boulders coming down weekly? You didn't tell my family and I about that. Why? Scratch your head some more. They should have told us in advance. It would have led to protocol, dialogue, and oversight and regulation or whatever. But that's what these conversations are all about. If people want to determine for themselves, maybe they were having good times under false pretenses, so be it. We want to present. But we do, Alicia, want to recognize that we very much are into the dark ages 2026. And until we finally address each zip code, all levels of baseball, we will remain there. And I do hope, of course, Alicia, these conversations are all about getting more influence. So maybe in the very near future, we'll say, you remember those dark ages back in 2026 when business as usual was done like that? Mm-hmm. Well, that's a thing of the past. What a shock. I want to go there. Let's go there. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so the way to get there is balancing tradition with the safety we need today. Look at it. The bats are more sophisticated. The supplements that they can take to become stronger, and the programs that the parents enroll them in to be the top and be the best are growing. And with looking at all that sophistication, you look at the fields and largely they remain the same as years ago. So how do we balance that tradition and safety when the players probably have reactions that are not the same as you and I, we who know about this issue? What are the players' reactions like?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the players. So the players supposedly on the major league level, they do have a union, the MLB Players Union. We heard that supposedly this was negotiated like 3 or 4 separate times in collective bargaining talks. But I'm still holding accountable the MLB Players Union because they could have made it a non-starter. They could have said, "Our guys aren't just not going to hit line drives at babies' heads anymore. We don't want to do that. We don't want near misses to be part of our work experience and unfortunately direct hits." So just in the last month, I had 2 conversations with 2 people who've had life-altering experiences. They're now part of the thousands of people that may never look at the game again the same way. One woman, her friend had the phone on and the video went viral, 17 million, 27 million views. She was in concussion protocol when we spoke with her. She was very kind to give us 30 minutes of her time. She had spoken to other news outlets for a few minutes, but she could tell that we were more interested in a detailed, longer interview, and she was kind to do that. And it's time to follow up with her because it's a little over a month, and we want to see how she's doing. And then another woman from Brianna's network found me, who I've now spoken to 3 or 4 times and potentially going to come to Los Angeles and speak to a bar association or a legal group. And her name is Carol. Carol said she would come and she'd be the guest speaker with me to talk about her experience. And that happened just over a year ago. She had to go to a high school reunion with a big bad bruise on her face. And it's 12 months later, and she has to contemplate next procedure because her face isn't all healed yet. So, these people are affected about it, and management always had something called the baseball rule, Alicia, and that's been in place since 1913. So they knew it was inevitable that people would be smashed inside and outside, and they knew most lawyers wouldn't even bother taking on the case because most states recognize this, meaning it's been on the back of the ticket years ago, and now it's on the e-ticket. You're at your own risk. So we will continue making the sounds we need to make about the enhancements and stronger and faster. I don't even bring that up because whether they were hitting the ball at 97 miles an hour when the 14-year-old boy got hit at Dodger Stadium and died a few days later in 1970, or 55, 56 years later, maybe that same ball's going 104. It's so what? They're stronger and they're faster. Bottom line is you can't react to it 56 years ago. You can't react to it now. So yes, the guys certainly are stronger. bats are going into seats. We have incidents this year on the website at Foul Ball Safety Now. Alicia, a lot of work needs to be done, even after what I'm about to tell you. On the website at Foul Ball Safety Now, you'll go to the T-Mobile tab and you'll see broken bat goes into seats during the playoff. So this man, Jorge Polanco, having the greatest game, he's hit 2 home runs, and one of his next at bats, he breaks his bat for an infield single. Wasn't a home run, it was a single. Nobody talked about the broken bat until like 5 minutes later when they went to commercial, Alicia. They showed the broken bat coming over the net into the seats that could spear your heart or neck. And you even hear the announcer saying, "Yikes, look out." And nobody in America made any comment. That tells me there's so much we need to penetrate, because the romance and the excitement, even broken bats, it's kind of like spilling over into cotton candy, where it should be its own separate conversation of concern, but it did not even become one. So I want everyone to look at that link and scratch your head why America didn't react to that. Why are broken bats still coming over nets? There's no architects, engineers, or designers at MLB level worth billions of dollars that have figured it out. Apparently not, or it's just not being tended to. And I just believe it's the latter. It's just not being tended to the right way.
Yeah, I mean that's a great link there. Everyone can go and visit the T-Mobile tab on your website. And I think that a couple of things are coming to mind when you're talking about
Sure.
all of this safety and change and affecting change. There's something that happened in my town, and it's
Uh-huh.
not related to baseball, but it is related to kids. There's a
Okay.
highway, and the highway, it's a one-lane highway, and there were kids who would cross to get to their house from the main center of town, and they would ride their bikes across. At one time, this was sufficient, but with the increased traffic and everything building up in the towns, it became unsafe. There were car accident after car accident, did a petition to put up a traffic light, and they wouldn't put up the traffic light despite all the accidents. There was even a boy who was hit on a bicycle. Finally, it took 6 years and 6 car accidents to make them revisit this with a different light. And again, I know that it's not related to baseball, but it's the same premise where there is a need for this. And if you could get all the people together in one place to demonstrate that human impact, all the families that were impacted by the foul ball injuries, that would prove why this work matters. I would love to see that happen. Get media attention, get everybody involved so that they understand that this is a definite need. We don't need our kids, our fans hit by balls. It's so simple. It could be remediated, and it just takes more people to get involved. It's America's favorite pastime.
Unfortunately, yes, it is, but the strings and conditions attached to the current experience. It's not a matter of if, or a matter of when. Um, when we say all of us should get together, most of the victims Brendan and I have connected to, we hope, of course, Carol will be around. Maybe I'll be coming out to LA in the next week or two, and maybe the audience will get bigger. Kumbaya, lawyers get together. Let's address what's happening in Dodger land and all around. Wonderful. I hope so. But most people, unfortunately, Alicia, who've given us their stories, they're very nice to do so. My lawyer's friend was blinded in New York when she was a teenager. And Lynn, my lawyer, said, "Hey, Jordan, you want to meet Jenny?" Jenny tells us a very powerful story. Years later, she's blinded at Shea Stadium as a 14-year-old. And she gave us a great interview. She says years later, her 8-year-old is playing baseball and she feels anxiety based on her experience. And her 8-year-old probably felt that mom was feeling anxiety and he quit. And now that boy is 30, maybe, I don't know, but he may be 30 and he may be telling his own child, "You don't want to play ball. Look what happened to your grandmother." these families are screwed. They're generational effect. Again, when I say screwed, they're more aware because it happened to them. 99% of the fans, it won't affect them or their next three generations. But we do know once you are affected by it, there's new entries every year into the less than 1% injured club. Brianna and I discovered 45 self reported injuries just on TikTok, and we're about to do that again halfway through the season to see from April, May, and now June how many self reported injuries they may be. People show us graphics of their face and their testimonials right after it happens, sometimes even while they're at the game with an ice pack. So it's very telling that it's not a sophistication of where the Nets go. There's never been a team of architects, engineers, and designers that presented themselves from MLB or any of the other professional leagues. Certainly would love to give the rationale on why Brianna should be coming to the game with her baby. I don't think they can because they know it's a flawed system, or they know it's unregulated. And I believe it's one guy wearing too many hats that's been overburdened with trying to create the best atmosphere as opposed to a team of architects, engineers, and designers. And once inquiring minds want to know, let's say from the media, then maybe they'll be pressed into disclosing exactly who's in charge. I believe it's more like one guy wearing too many hats as opposed to a team of architects, engineers, and designers fully employed by MLB that are constantly monitoring the situation. And unfortunately, Alicia, a lot of the baseball media, I did something with a playwright, an NYU playwright in season 4. We wrote a draft of a play, and we certainly took on the baseball media because we believe they've been ultimately looking the other way and not connecting the dots like they could have easily done and said, cry for regulation, you think? But we don't get articles like that.
Mm.
And we want articles like that. And we're excited to keep on breathing life into this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And as you're talking, I thought of
Yes.
something else, a real life
Sure.
example that happened. There was a Babe Ruth Little League field, and that's my experience, so I'm going back to
Yes.
that. But there was a safety concern. They got written up for one of the lights which had went out, and the electricity was causing an issue with the township. And so they had to fix it. Well, they put in a bid to a company that provided the lighting, and they wrote them a check to purchase the lights. Well, the people who had the oversight and the authority, they purchased a more inexpensive light that was a better cost so that they could install some of the safety nets. And I remember that happening. It was a blessing to not only the players, the fans, but it was also helpful to the others who lived nearby. There were houses, and those parents would complain because their kids couldn't even play outside in the yards because of fear of these balls coming back and hitting them. And I think one of the things is to bring these examples forward. Maybe these communities, if they can't bring in that infrastructure with architects, engineers, and designers, and there's no laws overarching everything, perhaps they can find creative ways to help improve the situation. I think, that's a story that I'm happy to share. And I know that a lot of times it takes volunteering, other people who might care about this to contribute money to those organizations. I think, in fact, I'm going to reach out to Babe Ruth myself after this. I'm happy to do that. And hopefully this will go out to more people. We can all get everyone to comment and share. This is such an important initiative. Jordan, let me ask you,
Yes, of
if
course.
there's one thing that you could change in all of the baseball ballparks and stadiums around the United States, what would that be?
I want a committed conversation around all baseball on all levels. And I think once we look, I use this expression, once we all look in the baseball mirror, did we cover everything? And do we like what we see? The old expression, do you look in the mirror? Do you like what you see? Let's look in the baseball mirror. Did we cover it all? We have not covered it all. People can go to my website and see student athletes and other professional baseball players giving me quotes. Jordan, every time I swing the bat, I have anxiety. Jordan, on kids' nights, my feelings really spike. Jordan, I would purposely foul balls off on purpose, knowing there were consequences. That was very powerful. Now, is that still happening? Probably, because I still know of 30 to 40 cities at the end of 2025 that had no netting past end of dugouts. And when you foul off a ball on purpose, may hit a net or it may not. That's what baseball players do. They're talented. They'll foul off balls on purpose to get their perfect pitch. And he was telling me 10 years after the fact, better late than never. Maybe current players are still in that dilemma. Well, if I foul off a ball to prolong my at bat, there may be some consequences along the way. I call it a present traumatic stress disorder, for lack of a better term. What are students and professional athletes telling me? They're telling me I have a courtship with the baseball world because I have posts and I organize conferences amongst baseball players. I paid the organizer to get five buddies in a room so we could speak freely. Nobody's being recorded. It's a safe space. I did one yesterday. You pick up things. And at the end of the day, young student athletes and growing, whatever level they're at, are compromised from the day they start playing because they know inevitably they're part of a culture that sends people to hospitals. And I want the younger generation to play the game free and clear. It came out that way when I asked the student athlete a while back after he was giving me some feedback. I said, "You just want to play the game free and clear, right?" He's like, "Right, right." I'm like, "Of course you do. Who doesn't? Everyone wants that. Let's create that." So I want the next generation of student athletes and all athletes to play the game they love, finally, free and clear. They don't have to stay indoctrinated into the culture of silence that they've inherited, that's been passed down. Hopefully, 30-year-old guys that are a little distant from the game are going to start saying, hey, we need to make it right. And until people look at themselves in the baseball mirror and have an honest conversation, this is going to remain. So
Mm.
I want to keep accountable those people that are in the game or an influence, and the families that are connected to those people, because they too are taking their feedback and experience from their child's experience and also not saying much about it. They don't want to jeopardize their kid's journey. Everyone wants to keep to themselves. The parents of a double A, triple A baseball player or any level, they're told by their child, "Mom, Dad, don't park there and sit there." But nobody else is told those
That's
things.
true. That's true. I
You
even parked
know,
my car once and got hit by a ball, and I didn't know. And then I went over to do it to move the car. Well, guess what? Another foul ball came my way. That was an interesting situation. Yeah, you're exactly right. If we could have, a champion for this conversation so that we could keep everyone informed and educated, I think that would be wonderful. Perhaps if you have any connections to any MLB players, we could make this happen.
Well, what we're doing is we're making the sounds, the three of us, but we're also building a library, a continuum. Somebody said this is a continuum series. So people will discover our recording, and we hope, of course, they will be influential. But most of the people within the game are within the game. The MLB Players Union, with a little bit of inquiry from some media, will find out that it's come up in collective bargaining and they continue to go to work. They did not say it's a non-starter. Everyone's legacy is what it is. I'm saying we are in the dark ages. How do we get out of the dark and into the light? We have a conversation. We look in the baseball mirror. We're real. We understand that younger student athletes are taking the same silent approach as the previous generation. Not correct. They're busting at the seams to play the game free and clear, Alicia. We would like to do that. We would like to give all players an opportunity to hit it as hard as you want, hit wherever you want. And how about that? You don't have to worry about it. And if anyone took a risk, they took it because they were age appropriate and they were told in advance. It's risky. And they say, I don't care. I'm signing. You're not drunk or stoned? Nope. All right, sign here. All right. They'll know they're taking a line drive in a place where they could be in danger. But don't put it in micro print and keep it in micro print or way down on an e-ticket in assumption of risk. Educate winter after winter after winter since the 14-year-old boy got hit at Dodger Stadium and died a few days later was an opportunity to tell everyone that there were near misses. And the reason why Alan got hit is because there were many near misses, and you may not want to be in that experience. That kind of thing. And that never really happened. And it's time to say, hey, what's done is done. It's a great game, but let's really have the word integrity be represented in the game. Right now, it's just a myth. It's wholesome apple pie, unconditional strings, good times attached to the baseball experience. It's mythical because I'm there to tell you there's always been strings and conditions and unknown factors that most of us would have appreciated knowing in advance before we sat in harm's way and got what we got. Nobody wants to be into that. Brendan and I have met too many sad stories, and we'll continue meeting them. So this has been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
I just have one last call to action for you. For the listeners who are hearing about this issue for the first time, what is the one thing you would like them to go out and do this week while preserving everything they love about the game, but also to help make baseball safer?
Well, I hope they have the courage to address what's really happening and not pretend all those years that they've experienced those close calls was always worthy of a conversation. Better late than never. And think about it that those young people are thinking about the same things or starting to develop what's right and wrong. And for whatever reason, for over 100 years, or for eternity for baseball, why us as growing adults decided that we're going to sweep that issue to the side and not address it as a factor. It's always been a factor. The players and their families, they knew it was a factor, but they did not spread the word effectively. They did not cry foul. And that's on them. And we'll all have to look in the baseball mirror and decide if we were courageous enough to look at it and address it. But still, we're failing as a society right now. I'm looking for a baseball civilized society, Alicia. We can do it. I'm excited that you're part of this with us. And I remain, optimistic. Healthy aggression, I always say. So Brianna and I will keep on contributing to these conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just hope everyone remembers those words. Look in the baseball mirror. Let's all work together to address what is happening and make baseball a civilized society. Love that, Jordan.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Brianna may have a question for you.
Yes, Alicia, as a mother, what does safety mean to you? And what are your expectations when you walk into an environment that's marketed as family friendly?
Well, safety to me is a loaded question because I grew up in a very unsafe environment. And so I think I was always a little more fearful of things that might happen. And in a way, that helped because I would always buy my son the right equipment, the right things to wear when he was in those environments. But when I had my baby with me, when we would go to see her brother play, I was more protective and I'd make sure that she had something covering her and I wouldn't put her in harm's way. I would, go in front of that. So safety is always about taking the extra steps to make sure that you have the right awareness for your surroundings. And that's where it starts, awareness. As far as my expectations for a family safe environment, I like the idea of signage, right? Those things that we may not be aware of. A lot of times when you have especially a new parent, you go into an environment and you really you're not aware that there's going to be, germs in the environment. You're not aware that there's going to be kids running around, running into you, and then you have you may fall, or if there's, you're bringing your other family members with you, maybe you have older adults, they're not going to be aware of noise levels, which may harm them. So all of these things, if they could be communicated ahead of time on signage. And again, I know that you don't want to see signs everywhere, but the small print in the contracts or the waivers when you sign up for something in a family environment, it doesn't always reach the individual, right? So if you have signage around, that would definitely help to improve any issues that could be otherwise avoided.
That was a very thoughtful response. I will just say this. It won't help us, even if the sign is right by our cup holder, sitting at the ballpark or standing outside. We're not action figures and superheroes, so we're really not capable. We need to be properly educated prior in proper ways. And if we're age appropriate and we really truly know the many near misses to experience, that's one thing. But most families would appreciate knowing that, wow, why would we sit there if there's going to be many near misses and yes, direct hits? We're not interested in anything like that. And that's what we all need. We need options, we need protocols, and we need to follow an example that's never been set forward. Exactly the strategy inside and outside. Mother of a 2-year-old, this is how it's going to happen. And I won't worry about any mini missiles coming at me at all, or broken bats making their way at us. No problem. But I think this is terrific. I really appreciate talking about the game I love with everyone. And Alicia, I want to thank you so much. And Brianna, as always, this has been terrific. And we'll do it again soon, everyone. Thank you.